my secret podcast. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout. They're a little Asian American restaurant kind of metaphor. You order, you take out, you consume. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific live. It's what do you order at the takeout? My takes. My takes on all things considerable. How are you? It's Thursday. This is a special day because this is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. I mean, that's like 5 words to say, well, it's Pearl Harbor Day. I remember day that lives in infamy, December 7th, 1941. Did anyone stop you and say that yet today? I mean, because if no one has yet, it wouldn't surprise me because a lot of people didn't study World War II. Or that they know in general, that Pearl Harbor, that's something my grandfather fought. Well, a lot of those guys are long gone now. They would be centenarians, and there are very few of them left now. 82 years, that's how long it's been, December 7th, 1941. And you got to have the National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, you got to have it elongated that way because people say, Pearl Harbor, was that a girl you dated in college? Pearl Harbor. There was a Filipino rock singer called Pearl Harbor. I think she's still around. Pearl Harbor and the Explosions. But no, I mean, I'm serious. Has anyone stopped you yet and said, hey, happy Pearl Harbor Day, which would be the simple way of greeting? I mean, you don't have people sending Hallmark cards to each other. Hey, day that lives in infamy. Are you living in infamy? I mean, it's not happening. But I hope that someone has, because it's an important day, and it's an even more important day, as I'll point out. If you read my ALDEF column, I do a column on the website of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And there I talk about this is a special day. This is a day that really still defines Asian Americans in this country, our special relationship to our own country that still sees us with suspicion at times. Where does that come from? December 7th, 1941. I mean, really, that's the history part that still lingers. I write about that on the ALDEF blog. I'll read from it today. But it's a special day. You know, I have gone through Pearl Harbor days and just wanting to avoid it because you know how hurtful it is. I mean, I guess maybe 20, 30 years ago, I would just say, oh, yeah, Pearl Harbor. Yeah, you know what? I got it. Yeah. It's painful. And I only just within the last, say, 5 years, I dug more into the history and tried to understand what is it about Pearl Harbor Day that, besides a surprise attack, U.S. involved officially, World War II. What was it? What does it mean to be Asian American in this country? And it really comes together comes to a point with Pearl Harbor Day, if you think about it. And I'll read from my essay in a second. Now, I actually did get a greeting. I subscribed to a service and it said, Happy National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day right at the top. And I said, now that's a smart marketer. And then it linked to an AP story, headline Centenarian survivors of Pearl Harbor attack are returning to honor those who perished 82 years ago. And there aren't that many people. I mean, there's one guy who remembers himself being a 140-pound 21-year-old. He's still a survivor, Ira Ike Shab, now 103. He was on he just remembers the planes coming from Japan. He had just closed his locker aboard the USS Dobbin, and he heard a call for the fire rescue party. He says, "We were pretty startled and scared to death. We didn't know what to expect, and we knew that if anything happened to us, that would be it." He went back to Pearl Harbor on the anniversary to remember the more than 2,300 servicemen killed. And he was just one of 5 survivors there at the ceremony. They had expected 6, but one wasn't feeling well. So they're all centenarians, and they're all just fading away. There's now just one crew member of the USS Arizona still living, 102-year-old Lou Conter of California. Shab was the oldest of those who attended this year's ceremony. He was accompanied by his son and his daughter and his family, and he arrived in a wheelchair. And they were there, 1,000 people there. They had 4 F-22 jets flying overhead. An important ceremony, National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day today, December 7th, 1941. In general, yeah, that's the way we ought to think about it. Maybe because we're talking about centenarians, the greatest generation, they're dwindling in number, just like every other World War II Remembrance Day. There are fewer and fewer because those who are in it are fading fast, and those who, there are those who haven't even studied Pearl Harbor. They don't know what it's about. So I'm saddened. I'm saddened by it. But Asian Americans, here's my take, and this was in the Aldef blog, and the title, Pearl Harbor Still Defines Asian America. And you see this Dorothea Lange photo of young Asian American girls, looks like they're mostly Japanese, with their hands over their heart, pledging allegiance, a black and white historical photo that just reminds you of what it was like in 1941. We talk about Fred Korematsu in January. He's the Japanese American who lived in Oakland, living his life. He was a young guy, and he was the guy who challenged the subsequent actions of the U.S. after the Pearl Harbor attack that said, "You Japanese American, you're incarcerated. We're sending you to the camps." And he said no. I talk about that more in January during Fred Korematsu Day. His case went all the way to the Supreme Court. But on Pearl Harbor Day, we just remember that day, that moment, the surprise attack, the bombing of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the Navy, as I said, I don't want to give short shrift to the number, but there were 2,200, was that it? More than 2,300 servicemen killed. That was a huge loss. It brought us back. So this is what I wrote on the Aldef blog. If you don't remember how special December 7th is, I get it. You're busy. You're likely traumatized after last night's GOP presidential debate, where Vivek Ramaswamy attacked fellow South Asian Paul Nikki Haley for Americanizing her name and playing identity politics. I mean, you've heard all the other things, where he calls her, a profiteer. He calls her corrupt. When she was in and out of a public service, working for corporations and on their boards. But, I do this show from an Asian American perspective, and what hit me most of all the things that Vivek Ramaswamy talked about last night was the identity politics of Nikki Haley, using Nikki Haley's Indian name, her given Indian name, as a kind of joke, because he said she lacked authenticity. Well, we don't really know what Vivek's authenticity is, because a lot of times Vivek seems more fake than he has to be, more offensively uproarious. How do we describe Vivek Ramaswamy? Smart and smarmy, with some good points that are overcome by his smart and smarminess. But like I said, I found it kind of traumatizing when Vivek was then using identity politics, criticizing Nikki Haley for that, and then saying, hey, we are a meritocratic nation. We are, yeah, right. That's why everyone loves you so much, Vivek, because it's a meritocratic nation and they don't like your style. Actually, I like some points he makes other than the bombastic ones. But, if you don't know that this is December 7th, I get it. You were traumatized by the debate last night. And then there was fellow debater Chris Christie, who rushed to Haley's defense, calling Ramaswamy the most obnoxious blowhard in America, which I think you'd get like 100% of the vote in America on that. Maybe 95%, because there's like 5%. He says, well, Vivek has something to say about the healthcare system. I thought it was noticeable, this takedown of Christie, who did, when he had the opportunity, try to take down Trump, the twice impeached, 4-time criminally indicted GOP front-running candidate who didn't even bother to show up. He's the guy who admitted on Fox News that if he were elected, he would be dictator, but just for a day, just for one day. But we all know that one day is one day too many in an endangered democracy. But all that was December 6th, right? This is December 7th, which lives on in a totally different universe of infamy, when an Asian dictator attacked America. It's been 82 years. Not exactly one of those special round-numbered years you herald and mourn or cheer as a great historical milestone. The 82nd time around for anything just has that ring of old news. The luster's off history. Few people remember. One yearns for the luxury of forgetting. That is a luxury. You don't have to think about it. We just have to think about, when's the next shooting going to happen in America? When's the next Republican debate? When's the next indictment of Trump? When's the next... There are so many things in our minds. But here's the thing. We can't afford to forget the history when the date in question is December 7th, 1941. If you're part of those dubbed the greatest generation, you'll never forget the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and the U.S. officially was forced into World War II. And if you're simply Asian American, you should never forget this day, because it gave us a kind of moral authority for the rest of our Asian American lives. We can point to this day and say, yeah, see, this is when it all began. This is when it turned on us. Because no matter what your age, your generation, your Asian ethnicity. No matter when you arrived in America, naturalized or born here, you've got to remember the day it all began on December 7th, 1941. Because before that day, Asian Americans were just othered in our own particular groups and in our own time. Chinese, Japanese, Indian, Filipino, we were all brought to America since the 19th century and then excluded or included based on political whim. Filipinos were colonized Americans, then they weren't. 1934, Tidings-McDuffie Act. Then they still had to like duck their heads if they didn't self-deport. But December 7th, 1941 forever shaped our American experience because Asian Americans, all of us, looked like the enemy. Our own country became confused and began to see all of us Asian Americans as perpetual foreigners. Say, we've been here since the 1890s. I mean, they're young kids or second generations growing up in California. They're among those put in the camps. From that day forward, December 7th, 1941, we were put in a special place. Japanese Americans, as I said, were rounded up, incarcerated in camps. If we weren't Japanese, we weren't incarcerated, but America still had a hard time distinguishing amongst us. Solidarity amongst Asians in America? Then, shamefully, this was a time when Chinese and Filipinos actually wore badges that proclaimed, hey, I'm not Japanese. I'm not, that's them. As Japanese American status plummeted, some groups rose in the pecking order of society. It happened all across America, in Asian American communities, in places like Stockton, on the East Coast, West Coast. It didn't matter. Some people rose up after the Japanese were on their descent because of December 7th, 1941, but it wasn't a good look for all of us. A few lucky Asian Americans were able to prove their loyalty to America and showed their patriotism on the battlefield. There were 18,000 Nisei who served in the military in 3 units: the U.S. Army's 100th Infantry Battalion, the Gopher Brokers, the 442nd, Regimental Combat Team, the RCT, the Military Intelligence Service. Those 3 units, what did it yield in terms of the kind of American patriotism proved on the battlefield? 3,600 Purple Hearts, 350 Silver Stars, 810 Brown Stars. Japanese Americans were a distinguished group in war. There are also 12,000 to 15,000 Chinese Americans who served in every branch of the military. And because Filipinos, the status changed from U.S. colonized nationals to aliens in 1934, President Roosevelt signed a special law allowing 7,000 Filipinos in America to fight in the newly formed 1st and 2nd Filipino Infantry Regiment. This is because it was an all-segregated army. The Filipinos had to fight for themselves, but it was the way they proved that they were American. 7,000. Now, this is not to be confused with the Filipinos who were in the Philippines, who answered a different call from Roosevelt to fight side by side and get benefits and get citizenship. And there were thousands who did and thousands who were screwed later by Harry Truman in 1946 when he passed the Rescission Act, or signed the Rescission Act, going back on that promise. Those were another set of Filipinos. Sometimes it's never really clear about that. But there were 7,000 Filipinos in America who fought in that 1st and 2nd Filipino Infantry Regiment. And what of that? The Army, the military gave many of our families, Asian American families, a fighting chance to show how we did belong in America. Because if you served, we also began to see the perks. The GI Bill gave access to education. The VA loans made affordable housing available. The war became the entry point to the American middle class. So Pearl Harbor was a terrible thing, and yet if we, it was an entree point. But now if you're like my father, 4F, disqualified from service due to health, the war was not the answer. My father lived in the Fillmore district, the Japanese American section of San Francisco, right there where Japantown is now, and felt what it was like to be Asian American when America was fighting Asians. Imagine that, Asian American when America was fighting Asians. It wasn't easy. So Asian Americans, we can't forget December 7th, 1941. Whether we realize it or not, what happened that day still plays a role in how we experience life in America. That lingering Pearl Harbor effect, 82 years later, will persist so long as Asian Americans continue to be perceived as foreigners in our own home country. And that capped off with a Dorothea Lange Library of Congress photograph is my essay, Pearl Harbor Still Defines Asian America. It's on the ALDEF blog, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. If you haven't said, hey, happy Pearl Harbor Day, tell your friends. Say, hey, I want to give you a hug. Let them know. It's an important day. Pearl Harbor Day. And to think, I there have been times when I just have not been particularly, we're busy, right? Trump was in trial today, and following that, there's so much news breaking. The Las Vegas shooter was identified as a disgruntled professor type who wasn't hired by UNLV. Still no word on the victims. I'm curious because there's a lot of Asian Americans who go to UNLV, a lot of people of color. I don't know who he went for, who were his victims. The shooter's gone. He's passed on. But, that's the act of war that mars the day. It's the war within. And it just is never ending. But the real wars, the big wars, the ones that happened 82 years ago, we got to worry about that. But they get overtaken by these minor things that are major because they're just right in our face. But please take a moment to remember Pearl Harbor Day, both for the sake of the centenarians who were there and the Americans who were there, or Americans who were not there, but who were, you don't have to be a centenarian. You could have been a young kid. I guess that would maybe make you 80 or 90. You might remember. If it was 82 years ago, let's say you were 5 years old, you'd be 87 now. You probably remember. I don't know what the commotion was. We're going to war. But remember that day. And if you're Asian American, as I said, it doesn't matter what generation, your age, doesn't even matter what country. Japanese, Filipino, Chinese, Korean, Pacific Islander, it doesn't matter. If you felt the sting of discrimination, probably December 7th, 1941 has something to do with that. All right, quickly, I just want to talk about some other news because there are other news stories worth talking about. Front page, of course, today, in today's Thursday paper. Well, interesting, the New York Times had a great big picture of people in the field. So had this great big picture of people in the fields. And it's a big picture story. And it says, immigrants on U.S. farms are reaching retirement age in a country that offers them neither Medicare nor Social Security. And so some of them say, we're just going to keep going until we drop. We can't stop working. We got to keep picking in the fields, which says how ridiculous it is that these people who come here to work, to pick our food, they're essentially screwed for life. And, criticize the New York Times, but at least they remind us in the front page story when all this other stuff is happening that here's a real problem in America that no one is talking about. And it's not just in California, it's all over the country. All right, here's Juana Castro, 80, who lives in Colquitt County, Georgia. In the bank, I keep enough to pay for my funeral, she says. I think I'll be in the fields to the day I die. Retirement without a net. Immigrant farm workers are growing older, but in the U.S., they can't stop working. Margarita Rojas, 77, and Teresa Flores, 66. They work in the Coachella Valley. You know it as the playground for Beyonce and others, right? To go wild and have those music parties. They say, we're old. We work anyway. The supervisors know our work because they are retired without a net. And they're going to work till they drop. So, you got to hand it. People have been critical of the New York Times of late because of, the coverage, Hamas and Israel and Palestine. But that becomes the top of the full picture story today. So, wanted to mention that. But the big headline was GOP blocks bill to fund Ukraine, rebuffing Biden. Just as a little how to read a newspaper, it's always this side that's the most important. The editors think that this is the most important story. It's all top of the fold, and on this side, as you look at it, the right side. And I mentioned this yesterday, how they're tying up the Ukraine funding on immigration, which I think is just chicken, as they say, chicken stuff. It's a chicken way to legislate for Republicans because it's an obscene thing. It's like saying we don't want to negotiate honestly, but we will score political points and we will force some pain. That's how we'll take care of immigration and Ukraine. And by the way, it's a supplemental, so it'll include some aid to Israel. But everything we do is going to cause pain, and the more pain for you, the better. The less pain for us, the better. This is no way to legislate. it's really holding important policy matters hostage because you can't think about it in a bigger way, in a way that, to solve the problem. Like, for example, to solve the immigration problem, you talk about immigration. We have had immigration reform for nearly 40 years. Not the comprehensive immigration reform that's needed. Instead, Republicans say, oh, we're going to put this border thing on this bill. And if you want the money for Ukraine, well, give in on all these points on the border. Oh, wait a minute. We're not horse traders. We're policy decision makers. If we allow ourselves to give into this, we're not debating or talking about the issue. We're horse trading, which is not really the effective way to get at an answer, to solve a problem, if you're here to solve a problem. If you're here to play politics, yeah, horse trade all you want. But if you're in Congress, we're here to solve problems. And money tied to Ukraine, or money for Ukraine tied to immigration, those are two separate issues. Why do you need to compromise both by making that kind of ridiculous demand? So I don't know how long this is going to go. Joe Biden has already made a pitch. He made a comment yesterday morning. He appeared before the cameras. But, he does it at like around noon or, 2 in the afternoon. So no one really sees it. It makes the news as a soundbite. But he wants the Congress to act before they go on Christmas break. I don't know if that's possible. Not if they're playing this chicken game. And, of course, no skin off the backs of the Republicans, although it is tied to some Israeli funding or Israel funding. And as Joe Biden pointed out, it's irresponsible because Ukraine is running out of money. And the Republicans will be allowing Putin to go in and take, cut Ukraine at the kneecaps, take over that land, a sovereign land. And then what happens with other NATO countries and the threat to them that Russia poses, and how much more will it cost if the U.S. has to defend? So I don't like this whole tactic of holding up Ukraine aid for immigration. Solve both, or because you tie it up together and you solve none of the problems well. But that's what people will say, well, that's par for the course for Congress. All right, the other thing I want to mention is the college presidents. They spoke Wednesday. The story really didn't hit till yesterday. But they spoke Wednesday. And it was out, but it didn't get much play. It got in the papers today. Or did I get that? I got that wrong. They spoke on Tuesday. They spoke late on Tuesday, so it didn't get in the papers until today, Thursday. They talked about it briefly, but the one thing that I got from the little bits that I saw is that Elise Stefanik is a bully. Elise Stefanik, who I guess this is her penance for being such a sycophant to Donald Trump and to all her MAGA friends who are now sort of abandoning her, like Kevin McCarthy's gone. I guess she sees herself on the road to leadership. But there she is, Elise Stefanik, the bully, who went to Harvard, beating up on the Harvard president, which I thought was pretty rich, and bullying her on the idea of of, well, Stefanik wants the Harvard president to just come out and say it's a call for genocide, it's racist, they should, people who call for that should be condemned. The Harvard president is an academic, and Claudine Gay, she wasn't being wishy-washy, but perhaps she wasn't being political in the way that Elise Stefanik wanted to push her. But these are situations that, you don't want to come out with a blanket statement. They said it's contextual. When someone says they're anti-Zionist, it doesn't mean they're racist. It could mean that they are against a certain policy. Debate ensues. This is the hallmark of free speech in a free university, in a university where free speech should reign. Academic freedom, thoughts should. Here's the thing about freedom of speech. You may not like the KKK, but they would have a right to speak. So to condemn someone for an act 100% of the time, like Elise Stefanik is going to showboat and say, yes, it must be 100%. And the university presidents are a little more circumspect and say, well, it depends on the context. It's a hypothetical you're asking me about. How about let's talk about the things that have happened. In the clips I saw, they didn't do that. But it's like this all or nothing thing, and Elise Stefanik is the bully. And I don't want to say these poor academic presidents, because let's face it, academic politics is, I've experienced some, it's just as treacherous as real politics. They are academics, so there's a certain amount of gentility that still kind of exists, or that we can expect to exist, because we're just talking about the ivory tower, the university. We're not talking about the free world, the White House, Congress. We're not talking about big boy, big girl politics. We're talking about administrators in the academy. And I think they were kind of taken by surprise that there's no subtlety. There's no nuance. It's like bang, bang, bang. Elise Stefanik is bullying you. Genocide is murder. Genocide is bad. Genocide should be banned. What's wrong with you, President, Madam President? Are you a racist? Are you a genocidal maniac? Are you siding with the wrong side? This is... I was astonished by it. I was hoping that... And I think a lot of people were looking at the president showing up there from Harvard, from MIT, from Penn, thought, oh, this was a place that they will ask questions and hear from what they... No, it's not a place for discourse. Congress is different from the academy. The academy is a place for discourse, and that's where the subtleties of the First Amendment come in. But people looking at that say, no, 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 and they'll haul you into Congress and they'll bang, 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 bang. Because the congressional hearing, if you haven't realized, is all about the show. Elise Stefanik, oh yeah, you may not like her because she's, gone full-fledged MAGA. She's lost her rocker. She was once, a reasonable conservative, and now she's like full-blown MAGA. And like I said, she's probably looking for some points. Oh, this is a clip where I'm banging away at the Harvard president. I'm saying, what do you mean, genocide? What do you mean? I'm standing up for the Jews. So she was looking for campaign clips to raise money, no doubt. And now I understand she wants to get the president at Penn fired. So this is not good. This is not good. This is a bullying, and we need something subtler. I've always been calling for teach-ins, and lately we've had people having teach-ins, and they're getting skewered because the teach-ins are seen as pro-Palestinian demonstrations when they should be seen as information points so that people can understand the context of the events of the day, put it into an historical context so that we can approach it sanely. Instead, it's political MMA, and it's sad. Anyway, I just wanted to comment on those three. But basically, I'm all about Pearl Harbor today, thinking about Pearl Harbor. Thinking about Pearl Harbor and also thinking about Shohei Ohtani. Wouldn't it be great if the Japanese-American baseball player, who is the best baseball player in the world, would sign with my favorite team, which would be the San Francisco Giants? He hasn't said yet, but I don't know. I hope he comes around and says, yeah, I think I'll sign for the Giants. But he might sign with the Dodgers. The Dodgers are still in the running. But apparently there was a little leak, and Shohei doesn't like leaks. And someone leaked that, the Dodgers met with Shohei, and I don't know. And some people think, is that going to sink it? And then maybe he won't go with the Dodgers. He'll go with the Giants. Don't know. I'd like to see him with the Giants. The Giants are like 9 regular players away from being great. There's only 9 players on a baseball team. Well, they need 9 good ones. 8, because the pitcher can, rest every 4th day. So they need 8 good players or 1 Shohei Ohtani. Although, as I say that, Shohei Ohtani has played with the Angels and hasn't even come close to winning. Because here's the thing, you can get all the players, all the millionaire, billionaire players. It's a team. A team. But the Giants already used their teamwork stardust when they won all those games. They won like over 110 games one year. And they by getting all-star years or career years from regular players. But after that career year, they're just back to regular players, and then you've got like a mediocre team. So they need stars. Hopefully they sign Shohei Ohtani. All right, I like to lighten up with little sports. Got to lighten up with little sports. Because it just reminds you that we have distractions for a reason. But don't forget, it is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Check out my column on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. You can also check out this show on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Check it out on Facebook at fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. Also on AMOK.com. Get some older shows. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific. Just to talk about the day's news, talk about life, talk about being vegan. You got to have access to greens. I'm running out of greens. That means I have to go out and go shopping now. But you got to have access to those greens. Okay, we also meditate. Meditation being the way to serenity. Serenity? A little loving kindness. Just like putting on an airplane mask, you mask yourself on first and then you mask others. So, self-love, and then let it spread. Of course. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time. Mahal Kita.